they paid for a big publicity campaign. I went from coast to coast on radio and television and newspaper interviews, and so the book became a huge bestseller. It's now published in 27 countries, and it's still selling. It's still selling. So that's how I became then very interested in sort of life before birth.
Right.
And life before birth, and giving the unborn child, certainly from the 6 months after conception, credibility in terms of intelligence, in terms of cognition, in terms of being able to remember things that happen during the last trimester. And having said that, just to come to a conclusion before everybody falls asleep, to come to a conclusion, so I became very interested in consciousness before birth and memory.
Yeah.
And so I followed that up. But one of the things that always bothered, and then I followed it up with several other books on similar subjects. But what always bothered me was the fact that I also had reports from patients or just non-patients, people all over the world, of memories going back further, going back right to conception. And so I was wondering, how is that possible? How is it, I mean, if these reports are credible, and I was able to ascertain them that they were credible, being supported by other people and documents and things like that. If that really happens, how does it happen biologically, physiologically? Okay, because as interesting as case reports are, which my critics call anecdotes.
Yes.
I'm
familiar with that from the world of animals as well.
Right,
that you
right.
see, if you haven't sort of got the animal in a scientific institute.
Yes,
and,
it's anecdotal.
Exactly.
We can
Whereas,
discount it.
which is crazy, because as soon as you have it in a scientific institute, everything is artificial.
Absolutely, exactly. So it even less credible in a sense. But anyway, so I was wondering about how that happens. And about 7 years ago, well, I guess it's about 8 years now. About 8 years ago, I came across in one of these medical journals that I read, I came across the story of a 44-year-old Frenchman who went to see his doctor because of a weakness in his left leg. And so they did all kinds of lab studies, including x-rays of his head. And to everyone's surprise, they found that this man had just a thin crust of brain tissue in his skull, and the rest of his skull was full of water, cerebrospinal fluid. And the medical condition is called hydrocephalus,
Yes.
water on the brain, hydrocephalus. Now, this man was 44 years old. He was a married man, 2 children, and gainfully employed in the French civil service. And I thought to myself, how is this possible? How can a man with 90% of his brain missing live normally? There must be somewhere else in the body some kind of a backup system to explain this, because there's no way. I mean, your computer could not function on 10% capacity. How can a person? So that's when I started, once again, looking into research and seeing that actually there were a lot of reports in the literature of children who, for example, had half of their brain or 3/4 of the brain removed because they were having epileptic attacks, which just continued and continued and continued, seizures. And the doctors could not stop them. And the only way they could stop them was to take part or a great part of their brains out. And the same with adults. And many of these people, not all of them, but many of these people continued to live normal lives. So when I saw that, the idea came to me that there has to be, you know, just like your computer has got a backup system. So if anything goes wrong with the computer, you can go to the cloud or whatever other backup system you have. That our brains must have a bodily backup system below the neck, so to speak. And so I started looking into how cells are made and how tissues in the body function and the intricate sort of network, sort of the ways cells communicate with each other, communicate with the brain, all this kind of stuff. Took me about 7 years to do that. And a lot of work, a lot of incredible amount of work. I read approximately 5,000 books and journals to gain, you know, a solid understanding of what's going on, including genetics, epigenetics, how information is passed from parental genes to the children's genes, all that kind of stuff.